Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Divine Data. I am Samantha Rose Paprin, and today I'm sat with Ed Cooke. Ed is a British entrepreneur. He has created and co-founded Memrise, which takes, I believe, memory techniques to help you learn the things that you may not think that you can learn. And during COVID, he has created, alongside some of his friends, Co-Reality Collective, which then sprung into action, Sparkleverse, and many other things. So hi, Ed, welcome in. I'm so excited to be talking to you today.
Hey, Samantha, lovely to meet you here on Zoom. And yeah, a pleasure to be on the show.
So Ed, I want to hear a little bit about how you got into Memrise, where you started that, what your philosophy is using these memory techniques. Let's start there.
Yeah, so Memrise is it's a language learning app, the path I took to found this app, which I did in 2010, was yeah, it was via kind of a somewhat unintentional obsession with memory techniques. So when I was in school, I was kind of very interested in consciousness, very interested in ideas, the interconnection between thought and perception and action and imagination. And then shortly after school, I ended up in hospital with a condition known as post-viral arthritis. And basically, your immune system has an odd reaction. It hits your joints, and you end up sort of with swollen joints, which is what arthritis means. And I ended up in hospital for 3 months with nothing to do, aged 18. And my curiosity led me to try and fill that time by studying ancient memory techniques. And so I got a few books on the topic, trained myself up in ancient memory techniques, and by the time I left hospital, I basically mastered the memory techniques, and I could memorize a deck of cards in 2 minutes. I could memorize poetry, languages, and all this stuff. And for a while, it was just a party trick. It was just like a sort of fun thing, but it kept on intersecting with my interests in philosophy and my interests in cognitive science, which I studied for about 7 years after that point. And the upshot was that I continually developed these techniques to apply to different things. And so I would use them for my philosophy degree, and I would use them to design parties, which we'll come back to in a bit. And I would use them to basically investigate the phenomenology of perception. And by the time I was in my last year, sort of studying philosophy and psychology at Oxford, my housemates were like a bit fed up with me sort of going, well, you know what, I may not have done the washing up, but I think I might be like one of the world's best memorizers. And so they sent me off. They packed me off to a memory competition in Kuala Lumpur, which was where the World Championships were being held that year. And I went along, and then I discovered this amazing community of memory technicians, and I competed in the World Memory Championships. I came 10th that first year, and then went on to compete in the World Memory Championships for about a decade, winning a load of medals, and really going deep into the possibilities of whatever you call them, brain hacks, cognitive control, memory techniques, all these things. And that led to a friendship with a guy called Greg Detra, who was studying neuroscience at Princeton, the neuroscience of memory, and an old friend called Ben Waitley, who, and then together we founded Memrise. And so anyway, so like this obsession with memory techniques turned into the desire to create a product which could help anybody learn like a genius. And that's basically what Memrise is. We focused on languages, and we have this app which has been pretty successful. We've had 50 million downloads. We have several 100,000 paying subscribers, and we have done all these wonderful innovations in language learning to really make language learning highly effective, but also beautiful and fun. And those two things always go together in my mind when it comes to like, what is the ultimate learning system? Well, it's one which is on the sort of almost scientific end of the spectrum. It's like extraordinarily effective. It's ruthlessly scientific. It integrates everything which is known about how the brain works to help people learn better. On the other hand, it makes the heart sing. It shows you what's beautiful and interesting about the world. It takes something which is, potentially intimidating, potentially quite feels like a school, potentially potentially a bit impoverished emotionally, and turns into something which enriches consciousness, which connects you emotionally to the world, and so on. And so, you know, at Memrise, we've made all sorts of kind of innovations, which, you know, I'm really pleased to sort of say have like had some small influence on other edtech startups as well. You know, so we pioneered spaced repetition in a kind of mainstream consumer product, which is the way that memories degrade over time, which is a natural process, and how to time those reminders to make those memories rich and strong again. We've also pioneered on the other side of the equation, capturing videos of native speakers in context. So we have this amazing database of, you know, now hundreds of thousands of videos of native speakers on the streets of their countries. You know, like, you know, the streets of Russia and Tokyo and Madrid and Rome and all these wonderful places, which like capture what is beautiful and interesting about a language and translate that into a form that kind of can animate the learner's mind and help them experience the beauty of language and therefore be motivated to continue learning.
Absolutely. I think it's so important that we do learn how to redefine education in a way, and not just have one streamlined way to educate, because we are all individual beings, and there's so much of education that becomes stale to many people, where they think that this is like a forced thing that they have to do and there's no fun way of doing it.
Yeah. And it's that interesting thing. It's so funny. It never ceases to amaze me how brilliant people's minds are, who like, who, you know, you'd never guess from their like their academic record or the kind of things they are like publicly credited with being able to do. You'd never guess in so many cases that the person has a brilliant mind, but you know, you get to know them, you connect with them, and you understand I guess the structure of their attention, of their motivation, and so on. And, you know, long story short, you see that they're extraordinarily brilliant. And you know, there's no pleasure greater in the world than like, you know, playing some small role, because after all, it always comes from within in the end. But like playing some small role in the evocation of somebody's native mental genius in their ability to learn.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are deterred from even finding out how brilliant their own minds are when they are in this like formal education, like especially in the United States. Like I know so many people who were brilliant, but they learned differently from others, and they were kind of put down by their teachers, whether it's in high school or university. Me personally, I dropped out of university and I went to the best university of them all, Life University, University of Life. You know, I figured out, you know, this kind of structure is not for me. I'm not meant to be put into that box, and some people are. Sometimes that structure is absolutely perfect for them, but oftentimes, more so than the average, people are looking for something different. They need to be educated in a different way to keep them actually motivated to do it. And there's so many different like forced classes and forced curricula that will make you want to walk away and run away from doing any of this. And if I had known that, you know, or if Memrise was in place when I was in high school, I would have said, oh, I'm not going to university. I want to do this, and I want to learn how to become an energy healer, and I want to become a yoga teacher, and that's what's going to bring me to the career I'm at today. However, I also like to believe that everything that I did in my life led me to where I am today. So it's all perfect and divine. I just think that there's a different way we can go about it with the next future generations. So you having that hand in it is so important. You know, you're out there performing your dharma for the world. You're out there performing your purpose. We all have these like integral little bits that we are here to offer for the greater good of humanity. And usually it's something that has inspired us personally. So with you becoming like the best, what are you called? The Grand Master of Memory, I think is one of the titles.
Yeah. I think a Grandmaster of Memory, but the one. But like, yeah, yeah. It's I mean, it's very. I mean, I remember years ago being on an airplane and it was just like, you know, I was like, it's like the Air France magazine or something, and there was an interview with the great violinist Yehudi Menuhin, and he was talking about how life is like a piece of music, which is to say that like at the point of composition, you've got no idea what it's going to become. You couldn't possibly. and you follow intuition, you configure, you configure what you can, you find the patterns, you reconfigure, and then towards the end, it can look inevitable, but every step of the way, it looked completely in doubt. And something you said there resonated, which is that I am a big believer in intention, and how with a project, for instance, in tech, you're always at a very local point in tech. You're saying like, okay, it's 2010, what are the available tech possibilities? And the same intention filtered through how the world is can become something vastly different. So, for instance, if I'd been born in 16th century Germany, for example, exactly the same spirit and intentions might have been expressed by becoming a particular kind of Christian monk, for example. And if I'd been born in 19th century England, there are a few more available possibilities. I might have become a children's author or whatever. And then in 10 years' time, my calling may be something quite different. But in all cases, the intention could be the same. And as you say, I think intention does come from something you particularly love that you've experienced yourself, and something which gives you sufficient energy that it's not pretentious for you to wish that energy on others too.
And it's not driven necessarily from ego. It's like this beautiful like gift to the world after you've discovered it. It's very intentional. It's very beautiful. And I love how it also like converges into what you do with Co-Reality Collective, because you found a fun way to educate, and now you found an even more fun way to educate and connect humans, and give them a space to heal. Even I've heard from many people who have attended the co-reality parties, and we'll give you a second to explain what that is in a moment, but who have said like, this saved my life during quarantine. And then, I mean, me personally, I've facilitated a couple of my own spaces, but when I was floating around those parties, I was learning a boatload. And yes, I was connecting with people, but I was learning in the way I wanted to learn. And I got to choose too. I got to choose on this map on the internet, like, what do I want to learn today? Okay, I'm going to go into this space and I'm going to learn about technology, or I'm going to learn this, or I'm going to go learn about whatever they were hosting in that party. And it's really incredible thing. And I think everybody should go and check out the co-reality parties that are happening. I think they're happening now monthly. So let us know a little bit about how that all started, how you transitioned from, doing Memrise into Co-Reality Collective and Sparkleverse.
Yeah, sure. So, and just so that our listeners can sort of track what's happening, I'll just kind of begin by explaining in a nutshell what it is. But Co-Reality Collective is a sort of somewhat anarchic collective of people who put on parties, basically online parties, and co-reality parties are now kind of well, they're quite a thing. We have a community, and we'll talk about that in a second. But it all began when, actually, I mean, I suppose, like, in terms of I think co-reality is the coming together of 1,000 different threads of people across the internet. But my own, perhaps quite minimal part in it was just that when the lockdown happened in London, and it was like, okay, you're basically not going to see anybody for the next 3 months. My first thought was like, well, where am I going to party? And the reason that was my question is that I consider parties to be the greatest art form, the receptacle of the highest forms of human consciousness, like many of the greatest moments of my life, of emotional connection, of intellectual epiphany, of love, and of course of just like good old-fashioned fun, have come at parties. And when I was 24, I guess, I'd done these philosophy degrees and cognitive science degrees, and I went to Italy for 3 months to try and write a theory of parties. Specifically, it was going to be a theory of house parties, because I saw what happened in one's consciousness at parties, and I saw that there was a way of speaking about human consciousness, which was enormously richer and deeper than anything which you'd find in the kind of philosophical literature on the topic. And I saw that it was possible to kind of write a book which was kind of basically implicitly like, if I was to write a theory of consciousness, it would be a theory of parties, because parties are where all of human life comes together, and the rest of it. Anyway, I tried to tackle the topic, but it was too immense. And at the time, I was also reading a book about a book called From Dawn Till Decadence by a guy called Jacques Barzoon. And Jacques Barzoon was a guy who wrote this book in his 90s. And he related the story at the beginning of this book. And this book, well, there's an incredible history of Western culture going from like basically 1492 to 1992. And he had proposed to his PhD supervisor when he was like 21. He proposed to him, he was like, I'd like to write a history of Western culture. And his supervisor had rather tartly responded, well, why don't you live your life first, learn what Western culture is, and then write the book? And so then that's what he did. And so he wrote it in his 90s. And it's the kind of manifestation of an immense life of intellectual labor where, you know, he was the world expert on things as diverse as English style, the nature of a university, Berlioz, the composer, Sherlock Holmes, and a million other things. So incredibly knowledgeable guy. Anyway, long detour, but that's what I encountered at the time. I was like, my God, this topic is too immense for my feeble brain. I better live life completely. And looking back, that was such a good decision, because I've subsequently had all sorts of party experiences, such as going to Burning Man and so on, which have elevated my conception of what the medium can achieve. But anyhow, so I've had this long-term love of parties, and you know, I guess if you had to name my other long-term love, it's memory palaces. And so memory palaces is this mnemonic technique where you structure thoughts within imagined mental spaces via images. And it's basically this kind of it's a technique in the rich sense of the term. It's a craft. It's something capable of mastery, of maneuvering your mind to organize enormous numbers of thoughts into these kind of cathedral-like structures where, you know, as a result of such practice, you can recite thousands of lines of poetry or learn vast amounts of information really fast. And I saw quite early that there was this intimate connection between memory palaces and parties. My 25th birthday party was a memory palace.
Wow.
And so I tried to create all these spaces to illustrate how experience depends fundamentally on context. And so at this party, we had all this cool stuff. We had like, I mean, what I'd done is I set up in this big barn a load of tables. So there were all these tunnels underneath the level of the party. And so people would come up out of these tunnels. So I had like tables back to back all over an enormous floor with occasionally a table missing. And then these tunnels through these tables. And then people would emerge into these spaces. And there was, for example, a room which was full to kind of neck level with balloons. So you'd just be in these balloons and you do something. And there was a space like where you'd just be underneath a piano and blindfolded underneath the piano, but someone would be playing the piano. And, you know, and there was a bunch of other stuff. And what this kind of structuring of a party does is it creates unique differentiated spaces of consciousness that allow people to experience something intensely and to remember what happened afterwards. Because what so often happens at a poorly designed party is you have an incredible time, but you've got no idea of what happened afterwards because everything happened in the same space, all the memories collide. It was like, I know I had a really good time, but I can hardly remember a single conversation. Whereas if you structure a party with lots of different spaces and a kind of narrative and different things coming through it, you can create, you can lay down in someone's mind a structure of memory which can resonate through the years and give that person basically an incredible set of memories that actually become the meaning of the experience itself. And this last point is one I will kind of finish on in my introduction to what co-reality is, which is that the quality and value of an experience depends not actually on, or certainly not exclusively on what happens when you're in it, but how it intersects and resonates and finds meaning and connection in the rest of your life.
I love that. And in a way, I can see how the co-reality collective parties have become that virtual memory palace as well, because each has
Yeah.
its section.
Yes. And so when the lockdown happened, I was like, my first thought was like, got to throw a party. And I assembled the coolest people in this kind of space of ideas I know. And so, I mean, some of the people present were Tom Green, a guy in San Francisco, with whom I've had many wonderful adventures of emotion and so on. Iona McNeil, who's a friend from university who has, quit her job as an accountant to become a professional organizer of fun. There's a guy, Carl Smith, who's an extraordinarily intellectually versatile and profound researcher in kind of virtual reality. And there are a couple of other characters who I'm rather letting down by not directly recording now. But we thought that, and we were like, well, let's throw a party. And so we threw this party called The Zone, loosely inspired by a film by Tarkovsky called The Stalker, where a bunch of guys walk around this sort of numinous zone. It's a Soviet film, in search of the place where their deepest desires come true, but they can't actually bring themselves to actually reach that place. I actually haven't seen this film, by the way. But I did read a book by Jeff Dyer, my favorite writer, on how it works. And the essence of his book is to say, do we actually know what our deepest desires are? And are we, in fact, rather afraid that our deepest desires might reflect poorly on who we are? That they actually may not be the deepest desires one would really want to have. And so it's this like fundamental philosophical exploration of desire. And the zone is this kind of mystical place. Anyways, the party's based around this. And it was basically, that one was pretty much, there was a map, but it was kind of just like a spreadsheet of links to Zoom rooms, but it had this narrative. And then at that party, a load of other really fantastic characters turn up. People like Michael Ronan, who's an amazing sort of virtual reality thinker in Berlin, and a guy called Thomas Duffy, who's a sort of burner and a thinker. Chris Adams, who's a very gifted software engineer who also loves parties and understands them deeply. And over time, we began to develop. After the first party, it was like, well, we got to do another one. It was so cool. And so we just carried on doing parties. And we did a party basically every 2 weeks for about 20 weeks during the lockdown. And these parties they began with on clickable maps, and you go down to these spaces, and all sorts of madness was having the spaces. And they go on for like 8 hours. Every party was at least 8 hours, with like sometimes up to 8 hours of after party. And quickly we began to discover we were having these amazing experiences, like profound connection, making actual friends. Connecting and learning and experiencing things. So that actually, although I was like stuck in my flat by myself for like 8 weeks, and as a highly gregarious character, that was quite tricky. I met this wonderful community of characters all around the world, and then with Chris specifically, we began building some software, and this is where kind of what Sparkle is, and the software is open source, and it's basically this kind of flexible space creation software designed to enable anybody to do whatever they like to create interesting spaces online. And we spent the months of the summer building jazz bars for my favorite jazz band, who are called Kansas Smithies in London, and other things. And then about a month before Burning Man, it became clear that we were going to have to like help online Burning Man happen. And so we piled in and we built the Sparkleverse, which is a kind of an elaborate digital metaphor for what Burning Man is. And the Co-Reality Collective had a camp in the Sparkleverse, along with about 100 other characters and camps, but the Co-Reality one was just the most awesome and the most magnificent. And we helped support online Burning Man. And at the risk of going on too long, during that week, I had one of the best nights of my life, roving around the playa, connecting with people from around the world, and it it was beautiful because I'd been stressed out of my brain for 6 weeks trying to build this elaborate tech platform, with of course, I'm spending all my day, as CEO of Memrise, which is an important company, and then we got to the end, and we can dive into all the details of Sparkleverse. We got to the end. We had the burning of the man. We built this amazing auditorium. Everyone loved it, and then finally, I could switch from like action mode into party mode, and through this process, I'd almost forgotten what party mode is. That like fundamental receptivity to whatever happens, that openness of spirit, that prioritization of anything which is fun. And I went on this kind of online rampage. It went on for about 12 hours. And of course, it's just me in front of my computer screen clicking around this kind of gamified virtual map. But this online rampage was just so beautiful. So, and this is just my experience, obviously. There's 5,000 other people had a bit of experience, but it was kind of important in my own narrative because it was so clear the distinction between action and then perception and experience, even though at some level they're intertwined. And it kind of, and when I was in that rampage, it all came together. I remembered why I'd worked so hard on this thing, and I remembered why I always thought memory palaces were so philosophically significant. And I remember why I love parties, and it was just one of those sort of those kind of golden moments in life, which
I think I witnessed that happen in a couple people in the space, especially if they were facilitating their own, until they were done with the specific task that they had signed up for, they were forgetting what we were all really doing there, and then remembering the second they got to go and just travel the interwebs and go through the virtual playa. And for me, I'm so grateful that Sparkleverse was created. Excuse me, I speak fast often. I'll try to slow down. But anyways, I have been saying for about a year before Burning Man happened, I'm going to Burning Man 2020. It's going to be my first burn. I'm so excited. And then of course, COVID happens and I'm just devastated, absolutely devastated that I'm not going to be able to go to my first burn. Not only did I get to go to my first Burning Man, I got to help facilitate spaces in Burning Man. And I know that's a big case of what Burning Man is. It's a co-creation, and anybody in camps can sign up to do something. But for the fact that I just thought I was going to be attending a Burning Man, and then I got to actually be part of like creating experiences at it, and all thanks to this Sparkleverse and Co-Reality Collective coming together, working with Burning Man and bringing this thing to life. Because nod my head and tap my head hat to, I'm losing the my hat to, there we go. To the virtual reality spaces that were created beyond just Sparkleverse. Like, they did great. But what I loved the most about Sparkleverse and Co-Reality Collective is that it was a really immersive experience. You weren't just going and logging onto Twitch or whatever to watch a stream of someone doing something really incredible. You weren't just putting on virtual reality goggles and chilling in that space. You were there speaking to and experiencing the energies of everybody that was creating it. And I know that I can feel energy off of a song or a recorded video or a live stream, but the fact that you're really there with the people, like, that just gave me so much hope for the continuation of this, because there's many people in this world who can't just go and attend a party, whether it's in lockdown or not, and to be able to create spaces like this, to be able to show human beings that we can find an energetic resonance through something like Zoom. We can learn so much. We can have just as much fun. And like you said, you're just sitting at home at your computer, right? But you're just as exhausted at the end of the week, like you went to a regular festival. You have that festival burnout. You've learned so much. You have a whole Rolodex of new people and teachers and artists in your life that you want to continue to connect with, learn from, and be entertained by. And it's really beautiful. So I'm super grateful that you guys did what you did. And I think that a lot of people, like you said, the thousands of other people who attended, whether it's the Burning Man or the other events that you guys have hosted as Co-Reality Collective, it's just been, it's such a godsend. It's so integral. It's so important because it's not just for the people in lockdown. Like I said, there are people who have a hard time, whether it's, you know, mental or physical disabilities that don't allow them to make it to a normal party like this. They can actually start to experience this stuff on a regular basis. And
Yeah.
also, furthermore, as someone who loves festivals and parties myself, it's often like you're given like a dose of really good medicine and then you have to wait for festival season to come back around. And it's like, no, we get to do this. We get to offer this and experience this more frequently than that. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, I mean, so many things you just said, Samantha, deserve picking up on, and but just one of them is that I guess the most interesting discovery we made over the course of the lockdown was that, like, that sense of immersion in virtual reality is not a technological thing. It's not like the resolution of your display. It's not any of this nonsense. It's the context which allows you to connect with other people. It's the presence and reality of other people. And so, fun enough, the first party, the kind of slogan was "This is real," because all that is real in human life is our experience. Full stop.
Absolutely.
And so, and the fact that something is mediated by a computer or whatever, is in some sense it's kind of what it's relevant, but it's kind of it's a footnote to actually the connection which is happening, how you're present to another person, how you share, and so on. And therefore, you know, among the universes which kind of made up the multiverse of Burning Man 2020, you know, the Sparkleverse was, you know, at some level technologically rudimentary. It was a clickable map. It was a bunch of spaces and zooms and art pieces and a bit of embedded video. But it was the way in which it was the culture. It was like, actually just like Burning Man, you know, it's sort of like, it was the attitude of sensibility and respect and participation and mutual connection and all these things which enabled it to be real.
Absolutely. And it's just, yeah, I love that it also like gives this new connotation too for people for partying. You know, you don't have to party in a specific type of way. Your party could look like sitting there and just speaking and philosophizing with a bunch of your friends. You know, for me, I, you know, grew up thinking parties just meant getting wasted and listening to loud music. Yeah, for some that's like a big part of it. But also I'm personally sober and I loved the fact that I could go into these parties and do what I do at the small gatherings that I curate at my own home. You know, I sit in meditation with friends, and whether it's even like a planned meditation or not, or we're just all of a sudden like, whoa, syncing up our energy fields and we're like, yep. And we drop in and we get to have that experience. And then move into, I think you said her name earlier, but the one with the complimentary tea, who does the complimentary tea, she gives compliments.
Iona, yeah.
Iona, yeah, exactly. And even with just something like that, it's she's working with, you know, channeling exactly what that person needs to hear at that time. And to be able to like experience a party in that way, I've been to a few around the world where it sounds like something along the lines of the birthday party you threw. I mean, yours sounds very unique to you, but you know, to be able to like pop in and out of these different experiences and not just have it be centered around what's at the bar, what's everybody drinking, you know, whatever. It's like, what else can we offer to each other as human beings, you know, as these incredibly dynamic beings with everything that we have to offer. And that's where I find it so special. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Actually, I was just going,
Oh, okay. No, it's just beautiful because in each space we really do get to see so many different things. There's a cabaret, there's the dance parties that are had with the DDP, with Gary LaChance.
Oh, Gary LaChance, what a genius.
What a genius. One of my really good friends. He's a brother to me. I try and party with them as often as I can. I see it definitely. They're going to win the Nobel Peace Prize for partying. I know that is his mission. That is like one of the first things I heard him say. And I was so tuned in the second I heard him say that on a stage. I was like, this person is going to change the world. And I think that that's what we are here to do collectively, is to help the evolution of humanity and of our consciousness and how we can grow and build. And it's not just in like the box of what we think education is meant to be, because to be able to throw these parties and attend these parties and learn so much, heal so much, connect so much, and have a shit ton of fun too while doing it, you know, like you get to leave. And people really think that, like, I don't even know what they think of me when I'm like, oh, sorry, I'm going to a party, and I close my bedroom door and I'm by myself, like in my room, and I'm like, wow, that was exhausting. Like, that was
yeah. It's so funny, isn't it? How you know, the night after an online party, I wake up in the morning or in the afternoon normally, and I look around my flat, and it's like 20 people have been smashing it up all night. There's like bottles of wine, there's like objects strewn all over the place, and it is this sort of, you know, as soon as you permit yourself to enter into the space of imagination of an online party, you're just there. It's like you're ceasing to remember there's a distinction, and I don't think that sort of YouTube is the right place to sort of describe it, but I've had experiences which have changed my views about even the nature of romantic connection. Can you, and like, on the face of it, you're like, can you really connect with somebody romantically online? It just seems like an insanity and the stupidest thing you've ever heard in the world. But my friends and through a variety of experiences which have sort of passed across the bow of my soul, I've seen how real that can be too, and that just seems insane. But I suppose at the end of the day, it's just the same thing as those two, I think they were Belgian or French monks and nuns. Yes, Eloise and Abelard. Anyway, but that was a kind of a epistolary, i.e. via letter, a correspondence between a nun and a monk, which is sort of one of the great literary testaments to love. And if you think about it, words are representations. They're abstractions from the direct felt connection you might have with another person, but these kinds of things are I suppose nothing new is happening here. Like reading or even storytelling was the original form of virtual reality. Reading is the greatest form of virtual reality. Virtual reality, once it sorts its shit out, may be a decent form of virtual reality, but
I think that it's just crushing the illusion of separation completely.
Yeah, I mean, illusion of separation is a good way of talking about it.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that, like you said, that we are, seeing that books were the original virtual reality, because you really do get shot into a new universe when you are reading a book. And it is incredible that we get to experience this now with technology. So we get this like added layer of that, so that we can see which we are creating in our minds, that reality, that truth, that what is. Whatever we're creating.
That may not be that itself. I don't think is necessarily an advantage, but because the act of evocation with your own imagination has its own powers. But I think one thing which is that it suddenly becomes multiplayer, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, it's always multiplayer, right? Or I mean, the illusion of separation is saying that it's not always multiplayer. Like,
Good. Yeah.
But yes, we get to.
So for example, like when you fall in love with an author, long dead author kind of thing, it's like you sometimes feel like, oh, this is actually my friend. This is my friend, and there's a connection through time, and that connection is real, right? If I say something and it kind of, you connect to it and you just see its truth and the rest of it, and I say something, I write on a piece of paper, and someone 200 years has that experience, qualitatively pretty similar, causally quite similar, and of course, if you're there with me, then we can interact and build and so on and so forth. But that is even possible when one is mulling on the works of someone who died in 1390, through a process of connection and rumination and the rest of it, to have a form of dialogue.
Exactly. And it's the understanding of like time not being linear in its own way. It's how you may experience, something that's coming from the 16th century in today's world. Like we are really time travelers.
Yeah.
And something I always joke around and say that even like time travelers are experiencing this. If this was a live stream right now, we'd have people experiencing it now. And then we'd have people experiencing it later when it's just posted on the interwebs. But while they're experiencing it, it is happening in the now. So it's really, really epic. It's really beautiful. I love that you're doing these parties. I love that you have Memrise. I want people to be able to find you. So I'm going to put all of your links in the episode description and all of the links to go to the upcoming parties. I don't know if this is going to be out before the Halloween one, but there's a Halloween party coming up.
Yeah, get it out before Shadoween. You can
Yeah.
even skip it, just like whack it out there, because Shadoween's going to be sick.
Yeah, I'm super excited for that. I'm going to be part of the witches coven there.
Oh, wow.
The magic in.
I read today that Macbeth, which famously is like has the witches coven in it, was for many years thought to be cursed, because basically some witches were pretty miffed at some of the contents. Anyway, that's something I learned today.
Well, you know what? I think that it's all about intentionality. I think that the witches that are being involved in this are not going to be cursing any of it. And I really want to also redefine the word witch and take away any of that negative connotation. Yes, we're powerful, because I'll consider myself to be a witch. For sure. I am a ritual master. That is one of the titles that I carry. So it's very witchy sounding. However, I use all of my magic for the light and for the greater good of humanity, for my own healing, because I believe to heal humanity, you must begin with thyself. You start on an individual level because, like we said, illusion of separation. So if I'm healing myself, then there will be this ripple effect. And yeah, like I've said, these co-reality parties, they're super healing. I'm sure even checking out Memrise is a healing thing in and of itself, or reading one of your books. I think it's called Remember, Learn to Do the Things That You Never Thought You Could. I'm sorry if I butchered the name of it. I think that's what it's called. You can correct
pretty
me.
much. Yeah. Remember. Yeah.
But we really get to learn that as an experience as human beings, is like we are really here individually, but we are doing the work collectively at all times, whether or not you're at these co-reality collective parties or you're just sitting at home learning how magnificent your mind truly can be and really is. Like deep down, we really are all this beautiful biotechnology. Like we are some of the most advanced technology on the planet. There might be other beings out there we haven't quite met yet, but for me, I just witness human beings as the most advanced technology, because you look at it, we created all other technology that exists. So
yeah, great. Although probably we didn't create it. I mean, there's I got Carl Smith, who I mentioned earlier, kind of philosopher and explorer of consciousness. I was talking to him about AI once, and I was like, oh god, no, I'm not sure about all this AI, Carl. Seems like it might like gain a life of its own and just do its own thing. And he was like, thing is, Ed, it's all part of nature. And so, I think it's a sort of nature which through its interaction with itself, which I guess is something that at some point kind of comes back to physics, it will bubble up, via the second law of thermodynamics. It will start creating structure, and therefore more complicated structure, and more complicated structure still, and then eventually animals, and then human beings, and then human beings with language and society, and then human beings with language and society and technology. And this is all sort of an expression of nature's way. And so we can, as you keep kind of implying in different ways and saying, it's the expression of something connected, something which doesn't include separation, and something which doesn't need to be second guessed.
Not at all. I love it. And I love that you said that, because I thought maybe I was crazy the other day when I was trying to explain that even like cars on the street, that's part of nature to
Mhm.
somebody. And I was like, no, that's part of creation. Like that's literally like anything and everything. It is like, like how do we explain that to people without them being like, no, this is da, da, da. And it's like, no, everything that's ever come into fruition is part of creation, is part of that greater consciousness
Mhm.
that we are all fractals of and creating from.
Yep.
So thank you for reminding me of something that I've said, and thank you for reminding me that maybe we didn't create all of this, you know.
Mhm.
um, we're just remembering how to put it all back together and how to bring it into the light and utilize it for the greatest good for humanity. And yeah, there are people who are out there utilizing our consciousness for not such great things.
Mhm.
But I don't know, I keep magnetizing more and more of the good. So I'm
Great.
really excited about this. I'm really excited to continue partying with Co-Reality Collective. I'm excited to see what else Mr. Captain Cook, Ed Cook, brings out to the world. Um, and if there's anything else you want to share with our listeners before we head out, I'd love to hear it.
I mean, perhaps I could just share one thought which kind of connects with these themes of intention, of how action changes the world and new possibilities emerge, which add momentum to ideas. But it's an old Goethe quote, probably overquoted, but I do love it. And it's, whenever you think a thing that you really want to do it. And then it's boldness has genius, power, and magic. And, I think in our society, there's a sort of tendency to feel like that we understand what's going on. Um, but we don't understand what's going on. And, the future, the immediate future, 1 year's time, is not played according to playbooks which have already been made happen. And we don't really rationally understand where the intersection of a human's motivations and genius and powers and possibilities of collaboration and all these things intersect with narrative. And so, boldness has genius, power, and magic. And and so, I think that's a general thought that sits in the spirit of every novel endeavor. Yeah, if you'll permit me, I'll just finish by flagging that.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, it's the all I know is I know nothing. The more I learn, the less I know. And to be able to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, to be able to lean into the unknown, and really, yeah, fortune favors the bold, right? To lean in and do the thing. Just go do
Yeah.
the thing. You have the idea. Don't wait for somebody else to do it. Go do it yourself.
Mhm.
And maybe a million other people have already done it, maybe not, but you're not going to get anywhere by just thinking of it. You got to go do it. Nike says just do it. And I totally believe in that. I think
Yeah.
I've held myself back for far too long. And now I'm finally just doing what I want to do. And I'm manifesting the reality of my dreams. And if that can be testament enough to convince other people to do the same, like everyone always asks, how do you have the life that you have? And it's like, I just do it. I just
Mhm.
chose one day to stop doing what others expected of me and do exactly what made my heart and soul thrive. So if I want to show up to an interview wearing a crown and a robe, I'm going to do so. And it feels good and it keeps me
Mhm.
in my flow.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah. Well, perfect. Thank you so much, Samantha. And I've really felt swept into your flow this evening. So thank you for your energy and sensibility. Much appreciated, and a pleasure to chat with you on such a fun range of topics.
Yeah, you as well. And I'll see you at Halloween. I'm sure of it.
You certainly will. Yeah.
All right. Well, Ed, you have a good night, sir.
Good night. Thank you so much.